Good afternoon. I come to church where I call responsible. I say that, you should say that. Good afternoon. My name is Ronald. I'm a Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer and Assistant to the President for Community Engagement here at the college. And I welcome you to the 2023 Reverend Dr. Ronald Keynote Address. This program serves as the kickoff to the inaugural Dream Week. Dream Week provides an opportunity to celebrate the life and legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in a collaborative effort between Luther College and the city of Decorah. We honor the fact that Dr. King's dream was not one that was simply a noun, which simply acknowledges a person, place, or thing, but one that became a verb and required action. As Dr. King once said, although we may have come in on different ships, we are now in the boat together. Therefore, what matters most is what we are doing for others. Albeit there have been great strides made in addressing social injustices and civil liberties for all, however, we must not just pursue equality, but equity through solidarity. We must remember Dr. King's dream was not only for one group of people, but it benefited all Americans from diverse backgrounds and experiences both new then and now. In that same spirit, we must be committed to living our mission here at Luther College that challenges us to be a campus where students, faculty, staff, as well as our community members are enlivened and transformed by encounters with one another, by the exchange of ideas, which shall encourage us to be responsive, creative, and compassionate as we engage with our ever-changing world. Today, it is my hope that during Dr. Ferguson's keynote address and during the remaining of Dream Week, we reflect on what we must do as a community to ensure that we are inclusive in our efforts to create belonging for all. At this time, we'll go with the flow of our program. You all have the program. All those that are on the program, you come up as accordingly, follow the leader, according as it's printed out, and we'll go from there. But I will introduce our campus of ministries pastor, Pastor Melissa Bills. Give her a round of applause.
Come today, strangers and friends. Come, all of you who have been ostracized and marginalized and left out. Come, all of you who know in your hearts that you have been indifferent in the face of injustice. Come, all of you who have prophetically challenged racism. Come, all of you who have been complicit. Come one, come all. Come again to the God who created you beloved, the God who calls us good. Come again to the fountain of life and receive again grace upon grace. I invite you to join me in prayer if that is your practice, or if not, to hold a moment of space and reflection. God, our Maker, you created all things and all people, fashioning us in your own image and likeness. We give you thanks for the wonder and beauty of the works of your hands, and we lament the many ways in which we seek to injure and tarnish each other and your creation. Might we again today be reminded of the truth of our existence, that we are one in you. May your spirit of truth refresh us and renew us. Fill us, we pray, with your grace and your strength. Delight our minds with life-giving thoughts toward one another. Empower us as we work toward eliminating racial discrimination. Bring us reconciliation and unity, and day by day renew our hearts in this work. We pray this in the name of the one who makes us one, Jesus the Christ. Amen.
Good afternoon. Not a preacher, but my grandfather was. I want to thank you for coming to this keynote address of our Dream Week, a week-long series of events that commemorate the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I'm particularly glad to have the mayor of Decorah with us today. As many of you have heard me say, Luther College is Decorah's college, and Decorah is our town, and together we're part of that great world house that Reverend Dr. King spoke of. Especially as we become ever more intentional about creating a community of belonging for all students, all faculty, all staff, and all guests on this campus, we recognize that campus doesn't truly stop at the entrance to College Drive. I'm grateful for Mayor Borowski's collaboration in ensuring that Decorah and Luther see each other as partners in this work together. Before our speaker, Dr. Ferguson, is introduced, I'd like to encourage you to take part in the other events this week and welcome Mayor Borowski to the stage to say a few words. Mayor Borowski.
If anybody knows what my history is, I'm more the librarian that steps back and is a little quieter. So if I get real close and it gets really loud, then you'll understand. As mayor of Decorah, it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Ferguson to our community, and from what I understand, it's really more a returning home, as he was a student here. I am so grateful for the presence of Luther College in our community and for the partnerships for public engagement. To be able to partner with many of the entities that are in our community with not only students and staff is beneficial for our community, but also for the students that are here. Dr. Clay and his team have put forth special events and activities planned for each day of the week that bring awareness to the working of Dr. King. I'm especially happy that he's doing partnerships with the school system as well, and also for opportunities for people to have discussions with students, public, and our community as well. So welcome, Dr. Ferguson.
Hello, everyone. I'm Char Kunkel. I'm professor of sociology and chair of the Identity Studies Department. I'm really here to introduce a student, right, who's going to introduce Ron. But I'd like to say welcome back, Ron. He was my colleague in sociology, a professor of sociology from 2015 to 2018. And then he left us, right, because he followed his wife, who got a better job. Right, I'm delighted to have him back, but I am going to introduce you to a student. You may know him as JT, he plays football, but he is also a business management major who will graduate in the spring. What you don't know, it's not on the program, he's also a sociology minor. And JT's in my class, J-term class, visual soc, and so he courageously volunteered to come and do this. JT, come on up.
What's going on? Hey, happy MLK Day. So my speech today is going to be dedicated to our fellow guest speaker, Ronald Ferguson. Ronald Ferguson is a teacher of sociology at Ridgewater College, located in Wilmar, Minnesota, where he offers courses in areas such as racialization and social inequality. In addition to teaching, he serves as one of Minnesota State's equity and inclusion coordinators. In this capacity, he facilitates system-wide initiatives to promote educational equity and belonging. Dr. Ferguson has published papers in several journals such as Great Plains Sociologist, Sociological Imagination, and Educational Research. Oh, and one more, Theory and Practice. A selection of recent works includes the evaluation of the college experience by Native American freshmen, as well as exploring the parenting process in biracial identity development. He also co-authored his new book, or the book, What Up with the Brothers? Black Masculinity in the 21st Century, and his new book project is co-authoring a model for institutional change. Dr. Ferguson has a long history of service via guest lectures and workshops on educational change through Minnesota and beyond. In addition, he actively serves on several professional associations, including a recent position as president of the Sociologists of Minnesota. He currently resides in Cold Spring, Minnesota, engaging in local efforts related to positive, systematic change. And one thing I did ask him was what kind of food he really liked. And he said he's a huge fan of Caribbean food and makes a mean jerk chicken with rice and beans. Everybody give a hand for Dr. Ronald Ferguson.
Seriously though, y'all gotta try my jerk chicken. It's awesome. My next visit. Thank you, JT, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. My name is Ron Ferguson. As you have heard, I serve as the Equity Inclusion Coordinator for the Minnesota State Colleges and Universities, as well as a sociology faculty member at Ridgewater College, so go Warriors. But as a former Luther faculty member, I am so happy to be here with you today in Decorah, so go North, right? Again, it's an absolute honor to be here with you all today and sharing the remembrance and celebration of the life of Dr. Martin Luther King. See, it's no light thing for me to preside over this session and conversation because of the influence that Dr. King has had over my life and the life of so many others. So my desire today is to provide a conversation that, however slightly, reflects the commitment to social justice and nonviolent actions. See, there's good reason to have such a conversation, isn't there? If you haven't noticed, we live in a day and age that we've been paradoxically endured both tragedy and triumph, haven't we? Right? In short periods of time. You know, it's like the Marvin Gaye song, What's Been Going On? Right? Seriously, what has been going on in our world? And one is, in many cases, just bombarded with the troubles of our time, and it seems like we have a lot more trouble than we do triumph. Therefore, Dr. King's work can ground us in both a mission of and redirect our steps towards a path of effective engagement. Well, before I get ahead of myself, because I'm ready to go, I'm excited to be up here today, but I want to give a brief account of Dr. King's life. Now, admittedly, some might say Dr. King needs no introduction, but it's essential to take the time and reflect on a life of service to society, community, and family. See, Dr. King was born in 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia, right? He'd be 94 years old this year, right? And was called early on to a life of ministry and graduate studies where he earned his PhD. He was a pastor in Atlanta, Georgia, first on, and in Montgomery, excuse me. This season, he found himself engaged in several individual and collective actions, from advocacy work during the bus strikes in 1958 to stewarding the SCLC, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, as well. In both contexts of the individual and group leader, he acted with courage, wisdom, and love. See, it's through these efforts of Dr. King, we saw substantial progress, whether it be the March on Washington in 1963 or the drafting of the Civil Rights legislation in 1964. See, he felt the heat of resistance during this time as well, during persecution in Birmingham, or as well as the violent attacks during worker strikes. See, a most powerful truth resides in all this is that Dr. King went into this work with eyes wide open, knowing the ultimate cost of such a harrowing call to the potential reality of what might happen in this work. This came to pass, his passing in 1968 at the age of 39, just shy of being 40. See, I share that, but that's really only a fraction of a life of a man, while admittedly, right, like all of us, imperfect, but he did in his life and service exemplify humanitarian excellence. Through the work of Dr. King in the civil rights era, we have seen some of the positive changes that take place. See, that all said, I hear people talking today oftentimes about, when I talk about the works of Dr. King that I've just enjoyed reading, whether it's his sermons of Strength to Love or his last book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? I hear people say this about Dr. King. It's like he wrote it for today. It's like he wrote it for right now, right? So when I hear that, although agreeing, I struggle with that, right? I struggle with that in the sense that these observations are true, yet we have come so far, haven't we? And then sometimes it feels that 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And so as we see today, the struggle is real, and we're continuing. We need to think about the lessons we can still learn from Dr. King as we've not gotten to the mountaintop, that the dream is ongoing. So in that end, I want to provide some lessons to you this afternoon. This isn't a comprehensive list of the lessons of Dr. King. Look, if we had to do that, we'd be here all day. And Dr. King said, as a Baptist preacher, he could go on a bit, and I share his inclination for loquaciousness. So I won't do that to you, but let me tell you, there's a lot to talk about with the lessons learned of Dr. King. So I will try to be succinct and on point with you with these lessons, but share some observations that can move us to action, that can compel us out of complacency. See, as Dr. King said, we need to really move beyond the monologue and have a dialogue. And so with that, I hope even to invite some questions or conversation at the end of this, because this can't be an ending with a period. This has to be an ending with an ellipsis, with multiple punctuations of exclamation. We have to leave moved. If not, what are we doing? We need to get to the work. So let me start by talking about lesson number 1. And in lesson number 1, it's about retaining our perspective. I'm going to give a little bit of the analogy of a landscape. So if you're like me, thinking about what's going on in the news each and every day, the bad news that's besetting us, it's not surprising that many of us are saying, let's just get to work. Let's jump into the fray. Let's move to action blindly into the fray, because in some ways, we need to have that sense of urgency. But the lesson that Dr. King tells us is actually quite the very alternate response. He understood, and in his time of organizing, we need to stop and have a sense of the what and the why. What is going on? Why is it happening? Why do we need to engage? He had a sense, as he worked with various people within his organizations, whether it be the CLC or his community organizing group, that they had to stop and collect data to understand what is the prevalence and the impact of what's happening around us. To us today in 2023 and beyond, we need to make a clear assessment of what's going on into that is the happening of this work. So we need to keep our eyes on that mountaintop constantly. As Stephen Covey says, we got to keep the main thing the main thing. We need to keep a focus of what we're fighting for. We're fighting for the marginalized communities. We're fighting for people that are just hanging on by a thread. We're fighting for people that say, this is it, I'm done, I'm tired of my humanity being taken away from me. We're fighting for that. We're fighting for the liberation of people that have felt like no one is standing in the gap for them. We cannot stop until we remember and recognize why we're here today. right? We must resist a fog of war that says we don't know what's happening, it's just chaos. But to say, oh no, we know what the opposition is, we know what the stakes are, and we know who we're fighting for. We need to be centered on that mountaintop. We need to name our goals. We need to name our goals of anti-racism. We need to name our goals of fighting for the marginalized communities. We have to continue to do that as Dr. King did. And keeping with that perspective, it's not just naming what and the why, but it's recognizing that with every mountain, we know that there's the valley. And some of you might feel like we're in a valley. We must not just imagine that, but prepare for valleys and times when we are struggling. You see, here's the thing. It's one thing to say we can speak truth to power, to stand in the gap and seek social change, right? It's one thing to say that, but to say it without any risk is nonsensical. There is going to be risk. There is no such thing in my mind as risk-free advocacy, right? So as such, we need to critically analyze the situation confronting us. Here's a spoiler alert for those of y'all who want to get involved in standing in the gap. You will meet resistance. You will meet resistance, and it will, in many times, be super, super costly to us. See, MLK suggests that freedom is never given to us freely by the oppressor, right? We got to force that change. And so Dr. King, you know what he did in his time of organizing? He routinely trained his members in a form of what he called self-purification, that he had members asking themselves questions like, am I ready to be harmed? Am I ready to be denigrated? Am I ready to have names called towards me? Even all kinds of violent actions maybe towards me. See, for this work, the reality of engaging the mountaintop is recognizing and preparing for that valley that we know, for some of us, standing in the gap will cost us our career, it could cost us our reputation, it could cost us our livelihood and other ways, it could cost us everything. This is no hyperbole, folks. This is the cost of activism. That is the reminder Dr. King told to his contemporaries, and that message in his writing has been clear, that recognizing the cost is a key after we understand the mountaintop, that is going to cost us something to get there. So engaging in the 21st century work, we got to get there with that in mind. See, the idea of the mountaintop and the valley is clear to me, but how do we get to the mountaintop is we need a little bit of momentum, right? Momentum. My spouse and I, we have an organization, a business called Momentum Center, and then that center, we believe that momentum is gained when we walk beside each other. And I think of that metaphorically in terms of the wind of us that come together and support one another. See, I focus on we need to act. We must get busy. We must get to work. You know what one worry that Dr. Martin Luther King had was the complacency of the moderate who was agreeable but not wanting to change things. Like ideologically agree, yeah, I know there's situations going on, but let's just wait. Let's just work within the time frame, slow, big institutions, big structures of change. Such things inevitably, as you know, lead to delay. And as Dr. King rightly put it, hope delayed is hope denied. In that vein, we need to look at our world today and address the winds of change via that momentum, right? Ibram Kendi said it best. He talked about there's no neutrality in this work, anti-racist work or otherwise. There's no neutrality. We either actively engage in this work or we're impeding it. I know that's quite, in some ways, a critical perspective, but we have to see it, that we must get to work. The lesson here is to be effective, is to ask, how are you? And think of ourselves in all this work. How are you actively engaging this work? Are you caught up in the wind working with others? Or are you waiting for someone to move you eventually? As one colleague of mine said, do you have a wishbone or do you have a backbone? What do you have when we do this work? And in that wind, the crux of the lesson here is this. Here's the crux of the lesson with the wind in our perspective. It's kind of what Gil Scott Heron said in his famous song, is he was saying, the revolution will not be televised. You know what Gil Scott Heron meant for that years ago in the movement of liberation, he meant that the movement is already happening. It's not something you're going to see later on. It's happening today. It's happening this month. There are many of us standing in the gap today, risking it all, and we need to be moved to that action. It is this courage that I admire Dr. King as he moved to action and did so knowing fully well. He knew fully well what it was going to cost him. He saw the wins and said, I can't wait any longer, right? And a lot of his work, so he talked about that. I can't wait. We got to move. He could have, as they designed the protests in Birmingham, he could have went back to Ebenezer Baptist and preached his Easter sermon. He could have done that. He could have, hey, I'm going to live my life and love the family and do the thing. And you know what? No one would have been against that. But he said, I have to go to Birmingham. I have to face injustice. I have to partner with those that are seeking change. And he did that. He did that. So that's lesson one, is to think of our perspective. It's always a matter of perspective, isn't it, as we start? But here's something that I talk about and I'm going to be vulnerable with you. This work is hard. As someone that engages this work, it's easy to be discouraged. It's easy to feel like, what's the point? There's so much disaster going on. The work is daunting. We must learn to protect our sensibilities and what is most dear, our hope and our optimism. See, King stated the road to progress is not going to ever be a straight line. It's going to zigzag, it's going to move, and it's mired with setbacks, challenges, and disappointments. During the 1960s, King found many people, right, that were with him that became, in some ways, disappointed, stressed, and saying, the slow-moving clock of liberation gave them a sense of futility. To be honest, I see one area that gives me a sense of hopelessness and struggle, and that is in the division that we see around us. The same divisions, in many cases, Dr. King saw in his time. And it feels like we're all, even within our allies, fighting against each other rather than that broader hope of liberation for all. See, Dr. King knew that. And as he said, we must overcome and not be overrun, right? To counter this despair, and as he talked about in his work, Strength to Love, and other works, he said, we can't fall into that intoxicating frenzy of violence and retribution. Instead, develop a methodology of nonviolence and path towards reconciliation, even with the opposition, even with the adversary. To engage this, as Dr. King points out, seeks to remove the bitterness of an us-them dichotomy and often perpetuates challenge. How do we achieve this today, right? I think about the stories of what does it take that we all do this together, right? And it isn't easy. Even when I look back on the story of the Good Samaritan, a story that is about a person who saw someone suffering in front of them that may even not like them or that they may have not cared for, and yet said, we need to help. We need to stand in the gap. And so to me, as we look at what is the opposite of despair and hope, it is in this audacity to love those that maybe have been put in the other. It's going to actually take all of us. And not all of us to sort of ideologically align, but all of us to stand in the gap together. As Bettina Love, who points out what a co-conspirator really is it, are you going to suffer with me? Do you see our fates intertwined? And you know what thing I've found in this work is doing this, getting this hope of a possible future, isn't necessarily involved in big, huge, arduous types of things that is out in the media. It can be these smallest acts of gestures. For many, the microaggressions that they might experience is death by 1,000 cuts. It's the ways in which people feel invisible. It's the ways in which people feel disrespected. And it's the times that you and I can engage and say, I want to stand with this person. They may not have or share my lived experience or share my worldview, but I want to stand with them. That's where Desmond Tutu talks about the neighbor using the philosophy of Ubuntu, the philosophy of I am because you are, and recognizing that Our lives, our futures are wrapped with each other, right? It's the king. The fate of our nation was never in a segmented, fractured society where different groups really protect their own. It was not about the polarized echo chambers that we sort of find our group, get in where we fit in, and we're fine there as long as we don't cross paths. We need to see the way out of despair, and our future of success is not in hostility, but often it's in a radical hospitality, right? We need to, as King says, not burn, but build, right? We need to not burn things down, but build things up together, right? And that's where King, in many cases, was so radical in saying the lesson we can learn is how do we form the bridges and roads in ways that are necessary. Can I say one more thing about despair? Because the struggle is real. I actually felt this as I was thinking about what I wanted to share with you today, and that is that we must, in this work, engage in self-care. It's said that self-care can be an act of resistance itself, and that you and I need to think about our own well-being. And you know, in some ways, to me, I cannot in this work be so downtrodden that it steals my joy, that I see that I still have hope that the future will be better. I still see the beauty and wonder of life, and regardless of the toils that we engage in, that there is a sort of fellowship of those that do this work together that can never be sort of understated and underappreciated, right? We need to think about self-care. And for those of you that are involved in engaging this work, take care of yourselves. Take the time to laugh and love and support each other. And it can be the smallest of things and encouragement. You know, the most beautiful thing someone said to me is really just someone that just goes beyond saying, Ron, how you doing? Hi, how's it going? But rather, no, how you really doing? And it will sit and listen to each other. And that small, seemingly sort of trite thing can be the very thing that gives a sense of like, no, I'm not alone. People care about me. So care about each other as a form of not falling into despair. I will not fall into despair in this work. And I do this with those that have supported me, and I stand on the shoulders of so many others. The last thing I want to bring up is lesson 3, as we've talked about the perspective, we've talked about the audacity of love, as King said. The third is we got to see the structure. See, we rightly celebrate the life and work of Dr. King, and his writings, though, indicate to us he saw this work always going beyond the individual or one action. What he recognized is that there were structural conditions that far more impact than the intent and work of a few individuals. Now, let me give a full disclosure here. I'm a sociologist, right? So as such, I see the world in systems and social constructions. So there is that, right? And so out of structures and norms, policies and practices are created, which in turn have an impact on the lived experiences of others. It is for this reason, in my mind, that King advocated for actions and effective practice and policies. See, he saw that the passion needed to be there from the individual, but he said it needs to go beyond that into structural change, as one saying, we need to not just have slogans, but we need programs. And programs and structure and policy is where it's at. See, they're not immovable things. That's the good news. Programs, social structures exist with people in them. People create them, people sustain them, and as such, we know that our final lesson, as King tells us, is that we can collectively work together to change the structures and lead to the reality of liberation and dismantling, then, policies that are hateful, denigrating to society. See, I believe it's in our plurality is where we have strength and love, right? You all know the e pluribus unum, out of many one. And I think it does take the collective, right, to think structurally, to engage in change, right? So if you remember, I said the power of looking at the other with compassion and care and not going into the us-them dichotomy, but it can't just be individually. See, Dr. King actually talked about the Good Samaritan in a different way as he critiques what can be done individually and saying we have to look at systemically. You know, he talks about what is called the Jericho Road, where the Good Samaritan met the person in need. And let me read to you what he said. On the one hand, we are called to play the Good Samaritan on life's roadside, but that will only be an initial act. One day we must come to see that the whole Jericho Road must be transformed so that men and women will not be constantly beaten and robbed as they make their journey on life's highway. True compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. It is not haphazard and superficial. It comes to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs to be restructured. Powerful words. See, what we need to see is the impact of structural change, that we go through the whole Jericho Road of our society. Yes, you and I individually make change. We're part of that ripple effect. But we also need to know it's going to take system thinking to get there, right? It's not just about good and bad apples, because yes, are there bad actors? Absolutely. But it's not just about good and bad actors, as Philip Zimbardo talks about. It's not just about that. It's about bad baskets. And you know what? It's also about who makes those baskets. Who are the basket makers? And we need to be system thinkers in that regard. I invite you in this room to be system thinkers, creators of laws and programs that provide suitable redress for the past and real hope for the future. We need this type of civic engagement now more than ever. So in my closing of this part of this journey right now, I want to first express my appreciation for all you being here. You could be anywhere today. It's MLK, people are off doing their things, but it's in the time of conversation and reflection that you've chosen, and I applaud you for doing that. It's not taking lightly that you take the time, and I can ask you, I implore you to continue to take the time in this conversation, in this reflection, and then most importantly, in the action. As I stated earlier, there are far more lessons to learn than the ones I discussed today. However, I want you to consider that in the dark times, in the fog of war, and when the conflict doesn't make any darn sense, we need to remember that first lesson, that it's a matter of our perspective, right? We need to recognize what the mountaintop looks like, that we keep it, that we name it, that we embrace it. We need to understand that there's a valley, that there's a cost, that there's a sacrifice, and none of this work is going to happen by proxy. It's going to take us. It's not somewhere else to do it. It's you and I. We got to do the work. And then third, that we recognize, most importantly, that it's in the collective, it's in the systems, it's in the structure that can create the changes, because we, in many cases, created this mess, and we can absolutely work to change it and engage it. We have to consider and move out of cynicism and fatalism that says we're all screwed, let's just go home and make the best of it. But we know that we have the audacity to believe that we can change this thing. I'm ready to do this work, and I invite you to join me. It isn't just a rhetoric, it's hopefully a call and encouraging to those that feel like you've been doing it alone, or you're maybe waiting to be invited to do it. You got your darn invitation. I hope you join me in this work. So, with hope and love together, let's do this. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, those of you that know me, again, the fact that we ended as early as we did is a minor miracle, because once I get started, I don't know when to stop. But I do, in keeping with King's belief that we need to move beyond monologue into dialogue, I want to include a section where we ask some questions. And like I said, if you dare to ask, I'm going to dare to try to answer. And you know what the beauty is? I don't have the answer. I have an answer, because I believe it's a plurality of answers that are actually going to give us the complete picture, isn't it? And so as much as I can lend to engaging in providing discourse that leads to a plurality of answers, that's where I want to go. So if there are questions, I don't know if we set this up a mic or anything like that, and if there's not, maybe just shout out, yell out, or what have you, right? I will be absolutely willing to engage. So, anyone have any questions? Yes?
Ferguson standing before the Assembly sharing her experience of having to carry her dead baby for 2 months because legally they couldn't remove the baby from her womb. So how do we get our young folks and our community to become more active in these movements and to get their voices heard and to do more than just protest on the side of ability or whatnot, but to actually get in there and be a part of this work so that we are not having our rights trampled upon?
I appreciate the question. And to your point, how do we get folks involved in civic engagement is a really, I think, a question many people want an answer to. And my response has generally been, is in some ways creating opportunities for the students to see their participation as real. So one example that I've been part of has been creating a sort of a community event where in the towns and communities that members of the community come in and talk to students. We actually had a listening session where students get to be involved in, here are the conversations, here's the policies being shaped, here are the elections going on, without leading to any partisan types of sort of avenues. Rather, what are some ways in which that you as a student or you as a person in the community can be apprised of what's the happening and the opportunities for you to be involved, whether it be at the ballot box or volunteering or what have you. So I think that has been one connection, is that we don't leave it to chance, that we create those opportunities in our institutions. And like we've done in my institution in Minnesota, is providing some of those broader civic engagement sessions where it is having folks that are involved in some of this types of thing talk about what are some ways that we can get involved. And of course, those of us that are engaged in creating change and calling into a better solution, it's allowing those voices to how do we call in better policy and practice? How do we make sure those voices are heard and not left in the margins? Because oftentimes those voices are not included, and allowing those as well, particularly those who are most impacted, right, by the policies that have been sort of either proposed or those that have been newly or historically enacted, right? That are we listening to the voices who have been impacted? Because we can look at data and, you know, I always use the phrase analysis paralysis. We can admire problems really well, can't we? But it's not admiring, it's listening to the voices and having an accountability. So what do we do with that, students? Do we listen to the voices of the margins, of the hurting, of the struggling that have been impacted by policy and ignore it? Or do we listen, be moved by it, and say, we are now accountable to do something? And so as in those intentional aspects. So thank you for the question. Other thoughts, even a response to that question, or others? I'd love to hear your thoughts and responses. Questions? Yes?
I have a response.
Please.
Groundwork in local government and the opportunity to be willing to step up and serve in any number of capacities in your local government or your state government or with legislators who are now in session, to be able to go down and actually talk to them and to work with them and be able to willing to step forward and serve in that capacity.
Absolutely. No, thank you. And I encourage that kind of activism, whether it's attending a local city council meeting or a legislative meeting at your state level, to even participating in other ways. Heck, running yourself for office. Don't exclude yourself from those opportunities, because those are absolutely things that you can participate in. So thank you for that. other questions or thoughts that you might have based on our conversation. Let's see, is there a hand up somewhere? Oh, thank you.
Hi, I'm a middle school teacher here in Decorah. So I've taught in Iowa for 15, 17 years. And it's great to have a positive attitude and to look toward the things that you've mentioned accomplishing things. And I think that we've accomplished things. I think, however, in the state of Iowa, currently in public education, we're looking at even slightly farther back right now in this session. So like they're attempting to put voucher programs in now, right now, in the next few days if they can do it. They've already told me what I can and cannot do in my classroom as far as critical race theory, which I don't actually teach because it's above the heads of my kids. But they've told me that I can't make white kids feel uncomfortable about oppressing black people for our history, because that makes them feel uncomfortable about their race. So like these things have happened in our state legislature here in Iowa. The actions that I've taken have not done enough. So like I guess that when I think about these problems, the immediacy is literally right now. Like it is my job is going to change this year if the legislation that has been proposed by the governor who is elected in this state by us. I like the word we because I am one of them. I did not vote for her, but I'm still a we. I'm a voter in Iowa. We did not stop us so far, and it's currently moving forward. And that I think that like what action can you take? Keep talking to people. Call these legislators. Call the governor as much as you can. Be educated about what is happening right now and rights that are being removed again from us. And most of you say it's students. I'm obviously not a student. My students don't vote. I have to be careful now about what I say in my classroom. Here it's a little freer. I live in Key County, so I'm not a Decorah resident. That's also another slippery area for me. But I do interact here. I think that this is an incredible institution. But I also think that it's important to be able to bring yourselves to action. Like you have the forum to bring action, like to do things. I personally ask you to do that. Like I'm asking you to do that.
Yeah. Thank you. And your comments and remarks are well received. And I think that's what that idea, that prescription of we need to stop and listen to the what, don't we? We need to see how folks are engaging or experiencing some of the challenges. And let me tell you, individually, right, you as a student or a community member or a staff or faculty might feel I'm limited, I'm vulnerable, but collectively, there's a lot we can do together. I work with student groups across the state of Minnesota, one being Lead MN, that they engage a charge collectively. And as a group, they are listened to and heard and help inform what movements we can do politically, socially, economically. And so to your point, we need to think, how do we leverage our sort of collective interest in some of these issues and leveraging it together. And look, this work is messy. If anything I've learned about doing the work of equity and inclusion, and as Dr. King has shown many times, this work is messy and complex. And it deserves more than sound bites, doesn't it? It deserves more than pithy statements that are just like, it comes down to this. It's complicated and nuanced, and there are many voices that are involved. But do not lead into despair, and leverage that collective interest in any way you can, that you keep talking about it, you keep working together towards it, and keeping that main thing the main thing, because it's so easy to be sidelined by some of the challenges within this very work. I see a hand back there. Can you go?
It's already degrading enough as it is being a 20-year-old adult having
First off, I want to say thank you for sharing that story. I really appreciate your courage. And then secondly, I am so sorry that that has happened to you. No one should have to experience that kind of degradation or feeling that of like dehumanizing feeling that one might feel living in the margins of where people do not see the humanity in those next to them. And so I will just say this, and before I leave, and I think it's an important note we think about with all this work, is that as we aspire, right, because a lot of this work I talked about is admittedly aspirational, isn't it, right? And so as we aspire for social change, I ask you this because working with students a few years ago on an anti-racist statement for a college. So the students were moved, given certain local events, to say, we need an anti-racism statement. We need to stand for anti-racism and the various other ways in which people are discriminated against and marginalized in our society. You know, one of the things that we became clear is if we're going to say what we're for and what we're against, we need to ask these question, can we live into that? How do you live in to a commitment to justice? How are you going to live in a commitment to caring for the community that you live in? We need to make sure that there's an accountability that we're committed, whether it's through our efforts individually, right? That we are listening, as you wisely said, and that we are also moving to action, right? Not just nodding our head in agreement, but saying, what are we going to do? Not what are you going to do? And then secondly, it's in our policies, it's in our budgets. As my one colleague said, budgets are moral documents. And it's in our budgets that we have, where are we funding for the ends that we so promise our community and our students? So thank you so much. And again, I invite you to continue this conversation. Remember, no periods, but the ellipsis of ongoing conversation that leads to a plurality of answers that engages change. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ferguson, for those lessons. Lesson of perspective, having an open mind, audacity to take the risk to create the change, the love and the capacity to engage in change and create those structures to move the needle forward. At this time, to close us out, we're going to have a performance by our very own Dr. Brooke Joyce, doing a song called Hymn to Freedom. And as we listen to him play, let's reflect upon the lessons shared by Dr. Ferguson and some of the insights from the questions asked. Dr. Brooke Joyce. Before we go, I just want to thank a few folks for their contributions to today's program and Dream Week. Of course, our President Ward, Mayor Borowski, Dr. Ferguson, the Identity Studies Department, who was able to get the speaker today through the Williams Endowment Fund, campus programming, student activities, the Center for Intercultural Engagement and Support, campus ministries, Decorah Public Schools, Decorah Public Library, Marketing and Communications Department, and of course you for participating and being a part. Just want to encourage you to participate in the rest of the Dream Week events. Tomorrow and Thursday we'll be engaging with our Decorah Public Schools. On Wednesday, as Dr. Ferguson talked about, continuing the conversation. The conversation will continue Wednesday evening at 6 p.m. in the CFL Recital Hall. And then on Friday we will have a MLK Day Chapel, a service lamenting racism here in the main hall. So hopefully you can come out and be a part of Dream Week. Again, making dreams not a noun but an action word. And it's my hope that you learn something today that can help carry you out throughout the week to create the change to ensure belonging for all. Thank you all for coming out this evening. Have a great day.